And just like that, it's winter. This is the day after Halloween. It's a Sunday, November 1st. And it's not too cold today, but it is windy. The other day I woke up, it was minus 5 degrees. And in my house it was 52 degrees. So if you're like me, you try to put off turning the heat on as long as possible. Not really to save money, that's not the primary reason. The real reason is just to do it, to see if you can do it, if you can hang in there long enough before you turn the heat on. Anyway, with it being 52 degrees inside, I thought that was a perfect day to turn on the heat in the house. But of course that meant that I had to figure out how to do it. But anyway, fret not, the house is warm. Crisis averted. Anyhow, my brother and I were talking on the phone the other day, and I was telling him I didn't have any ideas for upcoming videos, and he suggested, since it was Halloween, that I make a video about my favorite horror movies. And I thought that's a great idea. First thing I do is I go to Google. So I was searching 10 scariest movies. And then 20 scariest movies. I didn't like any on the list. And then I got a list of 45 scariest movies. And I noticed that every time I kept looking, Google would give me a list that was longer than the one I asked for. So finally, I found a list of the 200 scariest movies. Once I did that, I stopped looking. But there were only a few movies on that list of 200 that I really thought were scary to begin with. And then I realized that maybe the horror genre has to be redefined. Why do I say this? Well, I think if you look through a list of 200 scariest movies, or even the 10 scariest movies according to Google, you're going to find a list that includes mostly movies like Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street or Scary Movie. These are all slasher type movies, and that's how I would classify them. If you like those kinds of movies where all they do is people attack each other with knives, okay. I don't consider that horror. I never did. And I'm not really a fan of Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street or any of the other sort of franchise scary movies. They're just not scary as far as I'm concerned. What are scary to me, I think, actually qualify as horror movies that deal with the supernatural. If it doesn't have some kind of supernatural element to it, I don't think it really can be horror. Now, here's an example. The one movie that I think is the best horror movie ever made is The Haunting, the 1963 version. Not God Help Us All, the one made in 1990s. 1963, I think, is probably the best haunted house horror movie ever. Now, if you've seen it, you know that there's not a whole lot that happens in this movie. And after you see the movie, some people will go out and read the book. Now, the movie is called The Haunting. The book is known as The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And Stephen King gives her credit for being one of the best horror writers because of that book. It's a short book, but I'll tell you, when I read it, I was kind of disappointed. So I'm not really sure how people decided, based on the book, that there should be a movie about it. But the movie itself is excellent. I really enjoy The Haunting. I can hear some of you asking right now, how can a movie that has practically no action, or in the case of The Haunting, no action at all, how can that be a horror movie? Haunting is a horror movie because it has not only the supernatural element built into it, But it also has one other element that I think is essential to a good movie, and that is a mystery. Supernatural by itself is probably not that good of a movie, but if you mix it around a mystery, then you're going to have a good story that's going to hold your attention. The mystery in The Haunting, of course, is what's going on. What is it that's causing some of these things that are portrayed as supernatural in the film? Another example of this, and this is not really a horror movie, but it does contain both of the elements, and that is The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. There is a supernatural element, there is a mystery, but the whole thing is played for comedy. It's a Don Knotts classic. If you haven't ever seen The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, it's well worth it. Another example of what I think a horror movie is The Ring. The Ring is a thinking man's movie. There's supernatural elements and there's mystery. The Ring, of course, the English version, is based on the Japanese movie called Ringu. Now, I haven't really seen the full Ringu movie. I've watched bits and pieces of it, but it's in Japanese with English subtitles, and it's hard to really get into a movie like that, especially if there's an English version available. So I watched the English version, and I found it very interesting and very enjoyable. And on top of the supernatural and mystery elements, The Ring also plays around with the color cast that it has. If you'll notice, everything has sort of a greenish tinge to it. It's very atmospheric. So those are two good horror movies that I think, or two good scary movies that I think should be classified as horror. Haunting, 1963, and The Ring, the English version. I'm not sure what year that was made. I think it's interesting to note that Stephen King did come up with his own version of a haunted house story. It wasn't an actual short story or a novel. It was a screenplay for a TV series known as Rose Red. It was broadcast in the early 2000s, I think. But it was broadcast on ABC television over 3 nights, and I think it was 2 hours every night. I can't really remember, but the first 2 episodes hit all the points that I think are important in a movie. One, there was the supernatural connection, especially with all the backstory that they gave about the house that's known as Rose Red. And then there was the mystery that copied pretty much what The Haunting was. It was a group of investigators that were going to stay in the house over, I think it was Memorial Day weekend one year, and see what happens. They were going to do studies, see if they can get spirits or some kind of indication that, yes, the supernatural exists. But then after the second night, the final 2 hours, it descended into complete chaos when it started with the slasher type movie elements that I think just ruin everything. Somebody at ABC, or maybe Stephen King, said, hey, we need monsters. We need blood and explosions and everything else. And it completely wrecked the movie. The first 4 hours would keep my attention because I was absolutely interested or invested in what was going on. The supernatural element, the mystery, I even liked the characters. But the third night, I watched it, and soon after the last night started, I was kind of disappointed because I knew where it was going. And it just wrecked it. The last 2 hours of the 6-hour miniseries were just complete rubbish. But anyway, it started off good. That's my take on horror movies at Halloween. I think horror should be reclassified. Slasher, terroristic movies should be reclassified. Separate them. They're not the same thing. And the fact that I like The Haunting, someone that likes Nightmare on Elm Street probably wouldn't like The Haunting at all. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.